Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are calling this meeting to order at 5:42. Board study session. And we will start with our flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll start with roll call. Trustee Watkins. Here. Trustee Kim.
Here.
President Proctor.
I'm here.
President Proctor will be joining us by phone today or virtual. And I will need an approval of the agenda.
Move to approve. Motion to approve.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No, but for each vote, you have to do available and so because she's virtual.
Yeah.
Okay, so then they'll say.
Just like that, say like trustee.
Trustee Watkins.
Yes.
Trustee Kim.
Yes.
President Proctor.
Yes.
Roll call passes.
And
And yes, all for myself, yes. Passes 4-0. Any public statements related to the agenda items, please limit them to 3 minutes, and we will allow public statements at the end of the meeting. Today, we will be doing our board study session on early literacy. We will turn it over to you, Ms. Springfield.
All right.
You just
Yeah.
hang on a second.
Yeah.
Joe, are there any members of the public with their hands raised for public comment?
Not yet, but let me call for public comment right now. Good evening. We're calling on speakers for public comment. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on the Zoom meeting platform now. Speakers will have 3 minutes to give their remarks. At the moment, no raised hands.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and turn the meeting over to Ms. Springfield. Okay.
Good evening, board. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. I'm Pam Barkfield, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and I have here with me.
Aleida Valera Cruz, I'm the Director of Multilingual Learner Services.
And we're here tonight to talk to you about early language and literacy and the great work that we've been doing. Last year, we had a board study session on the early literacy work, and I think you'll see tonight how much work that we've done since the last time we have been here together. All right, actually, I just want to make sure I share it down. I'm going to reshare it because, okay. Right. Of course, we have a couple of. Oh, hold on, sorry. Here. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'll go back to this. That was very red.
We practice this.
I know.
I can
That's what
confirm.
happened. I
This
know.
didn't happen 45 minutes.
It went away. There it goes. And. One more time. Okay, present. Here we go.
Share some.
There we go.
Yes.
Okay. We always like to start our board study presentations with the work that began all of this. So as you know, we have our strategic plan with our key strategies around achievement, equity, and wellness, and our five building blocks. In the work that we're doing around early literacy, all of the work is specifically when we think about ensuring all students know how to read, fits within our goals. It fits within our achievement goal. One of the goals in particular is ensuring that all of our students are reading by third grade. It's an equity goal because we want to make sure it's not just some students, it's every student in our district, and our wellness goal, because one of the ways that we know students want to come to school is when they can access the curriculum. In this presentation, you'll hear about the work we've done in family community engagement in early literacy, the professional learning, how we make decisions based in data, the shared leadership, which is very exciting as part of the work in the early literacy, and that the things that we're spending money on are the things that are needed in order for this to work. So in tonight's presentation, we're going to talk about 3 different approaches. One thing last time, if some of you remember, when we first launched this work, there was a lot of conversation around, well, what is structured literacy? What about comprehension? Are we only doing phonics? And we left that meeting last year, me saying to you that we're talking about a comprehensive approach. And a comprehensive approach to literacy is not just one thing. So through tonight's presentation, you'll hear what we mean and the work that Aleda's team and my team have done on ensuring that our system understands what a comprehensive approach to literacy is. We're also going to talk deeply about our shared leadership strategy, which involves a lot of our teachers on special assignment and the teachers working together. And then we'll talk through how we use data to inform our decisions, but also what is looking at data look like at the school site as well. All right, so I want to take a moment to just remind us of our journey, because I recently been able to talk about this particular slide amongst people that are not part of our district. And when you take a moment and you share what you've been doing the last couple of years with others, it makes you proud, and it makes you realize, like, wow, we've come a long way in such a short time. And that's a testament to our system, to our superintendent, to our teachers, to our principals, and to our students. So it was back in 2021 when we had some teachers talking to us about, they've heard about this thing called Orton Gillingham. And we had teachers from some of our Title I schools and some of our other schools saying, something's not really working with the way I'm teaching reading, and we want to explore other options. And so we opened up to our teachers. We said, if you're interested in this training, it's called the MC training. It was based in Orton Gillingham. We'll send you. And it was on their own time. It was in the summer. And we, that year, had over 100 teachers attend. So that was a signal to us that, oh, we are looking for something different. And right around the time, we adopted our strategic plan. That really set the road in motion. And so last year, we implemented PATH, which is our structured literacy program. And we really gave our teachers the time and space to learn the program. When you're learning something new, you need time to try it out as it is, and then recognize, well, this works for students, this might not work for students. I'm going to go back and think about what I already know about best practices and bring that in there. But that takes some time, and our teachers need that time. We also implemented Footsteps to Brilliance as well that year. We had 23 language and literacy TOSAs, and thanks to our strategic plan and looking at our data, we ensured that it wasn't that it was one TOSA per school. We looked at our data. We thought about our needs at our Title I schools. And so while everyone had at least one, our Title I schools had 2 L&L TOSAs, and one of our Title I schools had 3 based on their numbers and their need. We did professional development that year for over 300 teachers, focusing on the K-2 work. There wasn't a teacher that year that didn't get the training on the new program, it was hard to accomplish, but we did it. We did it through the summer, and then we did it again in the fall. So this year has been a very exciting year. Aleda and I have had lots of great opportunities to bring our work together. And so there's been a lot of collaboration between the multilingual services team, the curriculum and instruction team. As we said, we developed a comprehensive literacy plan that we'll talk a little bit more about this evening, but we launched that in this summer's professional development with our teachers. We got to add 5 multilingual TOSAs to the mix. And then we're continuing our professional development in the summer, this past summer, and then throughout the school year. So just good to kind of take a moment and say, wow, that's been a lot. It doesn't feel like it. Just kidding, it's been a lot. So as I mentioned before, we're 2 teams, but we really have one goal. And the goal is to ensure that all of our students are accessing language and literacy and getting what they need to do that, because it's not a one size fits all program. So a couple of the ways that we do that is, like I said, Alita and I have ongoing collaboration, but also our TOSAs do. So we meet we meet more than weekly, but we have officially a weekly meeting. Our TOSAs meet weekly as well. So the multilingual and the language and literacy TOSAs have weekly meetings where they collaborate. We also have a TOSA leader collaborative where we bring in the math TOSAs, and we do that 3 times a year. And in that one, we talk about language across the disciplines and how to support all learners across the disciplines, and also talk about what is same and different in our different roles and how do we support teachers and students in this work. So those are 3 full day professional development days we have for the TOSA team. And then this year we also have learning walks and principal PLCs. And the principal PLCs is an opportunity for the principal to get together in one school. We have 5 of them this school year. So we go to 5 different schools and we walk through based on kind of the problem of practice that the school's thinking about, and that what we're supporting as a school district. So it's around literacy and mathematics. We go in all of the classrooms. We look for ensuring that all students are accessing the curriculum. We look for how are students feeling in the classroom. We look at the walls. And then when we come back, the exciting part of it is the principals get together in small groups and they create feedback to give back to that site leader based on patterns and trends. So these are 3 ways this year that we're moving towards together as a team, the language and literacy.
Great. So I'm going to share a little bit about how we came up with our comprehensive literacy plan. We used a lot of different research and a lot of different documents out there around the science of reading, around multilingual learner education and best practices. 2 of our biggest consultants who have been supporting us these last 2 years are Professor Rebecca Silverman and Professor Claude Goldenberg. They are early literacy experts and multilingual learner experts, professors of Stanford University. So they've come out and provided professional development for our teachers here in our district. We're also using the National Committee of Effective Literacy, developed by Dr. Lori Olson, who's also an expert on multilingual learner literacy approaches. In addition to that, we're using documents coming out of our California Department of Education, such as the California English Learner Roadmap, which helps us ground ourselves around what are the instructional needs for our multilingual students. With that in mind, we also ground the work that we do on the California ELA and ELD framework. So all of these documents, all of this research has helped us to develop what we've named the San Mateo-Foster City Comprehensive Literacy Plan, which has 4 elements. So I'm going to explain a little bit about those 4 elements. As Pam was mentioning, there's a lot of misconception out there around the science of reading. A lot of people think that it's just phonics, that there's nothing else but phonics, but we've actually been reading a lot of research that shines light as to all the different components that students need in a science of reading literacy approach. The first one is around foundational skills, which means we need to provide our students with systematic and explicit instruction in phonics, phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, fluency, and comprehension. The second element is around making sure that our students have access to grade level core texts that are linguistically and culturally relevant. So making sure that our students are able to have those books that are science, history-based at each of their grade levels, and making sure that they see themselves represented in those texts. This also helps build their knowledge because we want the text to be thematically unified. So meaning if they're reading about animals in their science standards, we want all the text to be around the same topic to help build that knowledge around that animals theme. The third element is around English language development. So For multilingual students, they need to have integrated ELD and designated ELD. Integrated makes reference to all the different strategies that we use during the day to ensure that kids are accessing for instruction in all the content areas: science, math, literacy, even PE. Of course, we want to see kids accessing all the content and all the areas. And designated are those 30 minutes a day in which the teachers are targeting their English language development level, and they're focusing on how the language works. The fourth element is assessment and acceleration, making sure that we're using data to drive instruction, to monitor student progress, and to develop these acceleration and intervention supports for our students. So one of the biggest frameworks that we also draw upon, that's also mentioned in a lot of the research that I also already mentioned, is the multi-tier systems of support, which is a systematic approach of supporting all of our students in all areas. In all areas, I mean academic, social emotional, and behavioral. This approach or framework is tiered. So we are using this tiered approach in our comprehensive literacy plan, starting in tier 1, which are all the strategies and core instructional materials that we use to make sure that all of our students are getting access to all of these things. These are the supports that you see in the classroom. Tier 2 are the supports that we could also provide in the classroom for fewer amount of students. So about 15% of our students typically need tier 2 support. And these are in addition to tier 1. We do not recommend that tier 2 instruction or interventions be instead of tier 1. And a good practice is that, and Pam will speak more about this, but good practice is that our students get intervention in addition to the tier 4 instruction that they're getting every day. And then tier 3 are just more intensified supports that our students get in a smaller setting. This is typically outside of the classroom. So in an MTSS model, if we see more than 20% of our students struggling, that's an indicator that we need to focus more on tier 1. What is happening in our classrooms, which is what we're doing currently, reinforcing all of our tier 1 instruction.
So when we think about the language and literacy program in our district, well, what does that look like? What are we using? So for tier 1 in K2, we use the PATH program for the foundational skills and ensuring the students can crack the code and lift the words off the page and engage. And I know many of you have seen it, but engage in comprehension and decodable books and feeling success with that. We also still use a benchmark, which is our core program, that's K5. In K2, the teachers work to have the PATH program do the foundational and follow the early literacy standards around those skills, and they use benchmark more for the building knowledge through access to complex text. We also have Footsteps of Brilliance as part of our tier 1 program because everyone has access to that. And again, that's something that we really support for at-home use. But you'll also see all 3 of those programs also in tier 2. And the reason for that is you don't always need a separate program for intervention. Sometimes it's pacing, sometimes it's modification of the program, sometimes it's giving something a little bit more, meeting with the student one-to-one or the pace. So, and that can be done in the classroom or sometimes outside the classroom with the intervention specialist. So we always want to have benchmark and Footsteps of Brilliance also as a tier 2 program, because we always want to remind us that it's not, doesn't always have to be in place, it could be in addition. So students can be getting PATH in their tier 1 program with their teacher. And then I'll share at the end an example of how a teacher is using PATH to provide tier 2 as well. But sometimes it could be just with if the student's working on the letter sounds and they're struggling with that sound, how do we integrate more multimodal opportunities for the student, maybe using sand so they can feel the letter as they're writing it, or using Play-Doh so they can build it. So those can be ways that you could do tier 2 that maybe not everybody needs, but some students need. This year, where'd that go? Okay, I don't know if everyone else sees that, but, so this year, I think we talked a little bit last year about what's happening in the upper grades. So, this year we implemented, or stronger implementation of the rewards, which we had last year, but, there's been a stronger implementation that at 4th and 5th grade. Rewards is, again, a phonics-based program, but meant for older students. Some of the decodable, some people might say, let's just use PATH, but PATH's pretty young, and so it's not really appropriate for upper grade. So the 4th and 5th grade teachers, for students who are not yet reading at grade level based on our district assessments, the TOSA and or the teacher are using rewards program. Phonics for reading is something new that we're trying out this year. All the schools are kind of trying out different ways to use it. So for example, one school, it's happening in the classroom, but kids are switching amongst the grade level. In other schools, they might be doing it in a small group with certain students. So it's really depending on the need of the school, but our schools are trying out those programs. And in April, we will be having a meeting where we're going to be addressing how is it working? Is it meeting the needs of our students? What is the data saying in that, just so we can start planning for next year if we want to continue with this intervention. And again, both programs are intended to work for students who have not yet cracked the code and not yet able to read. We also have an additional resource that our special education teachers use. Some of our special education teachers use the PATH. All of them have access to the benchmark program. Spire is another Orton Gillingham based program similar to PATH. It just goes at a different pace and goes a little bit more in depth. So our special education teachers use Spire in addition to or alongside the PATH. They usually have to pick one of the scope and sequence. You can't do both or it's too confusing, but they might choose the Spire scope and sequence, but use some of the elements from PATH. And so when we think about implementation, so we talked about a lot of theory about the frameworks that we're using. Our implementation comes up and shows up in 3 different places that we'll talk about this evening. One is ensuring we have the right materials in place. And at this time, and based on what we're seeing in classrooms, we do. Ensuring that we provide professional development, not just on the curriculum, but Alita will share soon on how do we ensure that the strategies we're using in the program are meeting the needs of all of our students. All of our teachers are really great at learning a program and then saying, that's not really working for all the kids in my class. So I need to take what the program's telling me and then add this knowledge or this strategy that I know is going to work to ensure that everyone has access to it. So a program is never going to meet the needs of every kid because all of our kids are different, which is what we love about them. So the professional development this year, again, Alita will talk about it, really addresses what are strategies that we know work for multilingual learners because that supports every student in the classroom. And then we have some exciting work that we've been doing with family community engagement to ensure that our students are accessing our program at home as well. So we're going to turn it over to one of our teachers for a moment. This is a video that we did earlier this year. This is a teacher who's talking about, mostly she's talking about, you'll see elements of the PATH program, but if you listen, you'll hear kind of the elements of our comprehensive literacy plan. She's talking a little bit about her experience with the implementation of the work that we're doing. It's a 1st grade teacher.
I'm in, I don't know, my year 20 something. I kind of lost track. And so I've been at Audubon for a long time and I really like it here. It's a great place to be. I've been teaching 1st grade now for, I think I'm in my 10th or 12th year, somewhere around there. Never thought I'd be in primary. I always thought I was going to be 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And it really wasn't until I got to 1st and I developed the love for teaching reading that really helped me and it showed me where I needed to be. So a while back, I actually got my reading certificate. And I remember specifically at one point, I was always really confused by the whole 3-method cueing system. I never understood that. And I was actually really excited to get my reading certificate. And because I thought, oh, they're going to explain it and it's going to help me understand this better and how to do it, because I never really quite, it always seemed so weird to me and I never got it. And it was never taught. I actually felt this huge sense of guilt that I have been wronging some of my students because I never got to the pinpoint of what they were missing. It was a bit of a relief to be able to finally have a program that would help us in those areas. I felt like I was really able to pinpoint things right away in the learning deficiencies of some of my students. And it really helped notice because it's so sequential in what they are learning and very explicit teaching. And so I was really able to see, wait a second, the student isn't getting this sound. Oh, wait, or this sound and this sound. And so it helped me really kind of tackle those red flags. But I think it does really help get those red flags right away so we can really start in with all of the interventions a lot sooner than I think we normally would have. So they're getting both the pictures as well as the sounds, which I think is so incredibly helpful, especially those that are coming from a whole new alphabet system. I'm really seeing that, and we're really trying as a first grade team this year now to make it more of a focus and really get that letter writing down so that it will help improve their sounds, their sentences, and everything. I'm also seeing a lot of improvement with their blending and segmenting as well, not as much guessing. My hope for as long-term readers is that they still continue to find that joy and enjoy reading and enjoy all of the things that reading has to offer. The fact that we are leaning in this direction in PATH and the type of reading instruction that PATH does, I think it's been really helpful for the students. I do think that there's more work to do. I feel like I'm always trying to do better and always trying to seek better things. I'm always changing my program to try to make things better and try to improve. And I do think that we have the supportive environment here and the flexibility to be able to dive deeper, fix things, change things, and make it better.
So an example of, she's mostly talking about our PATH program, but an opportunity for her to have a program that allows her to see more instead of, I think what we were experiencing in classrooms was, I'm not sure what's going on with my students. And as she said, we always have lots more to do, which I love because this was just the beginning of this work. So when we think about that's our comprehensive approach to it, those are the components of it. One of the important pieces in order for this work to happen, you saw there was another person in the room with her in the video, is our shared leadership and instructional coaching model. We couldn't do it without the work of our language and literacy TOSAs and our multilingual TOSAs. So again, I mentioned earlier, we have 23 language and literacy TOSAs. We still have the same group that we had last year, which has been amazing. Last year, their work was deeply focused in learning the new curriculum alongside the teachers. This year, it's they're expanding to more of a push-in model in some of the schools where they're in the classroom supporting the teacher with the program. There are times where it makes more sense to maybe make the class a little bit smaller and the TOSA is working with the students here and the teachers are working with here. But the push-in model is also allowing the TOSA and the teacher to have those in the moment conversations about students. So the L&L TOSAs, we expanded the work. Instead of last year was K2, it's K3. So our kindergarten through third grade teachers are in professional development together, meeting together. Third, again, doesn't use PATH, but the students coming from second that are not still yet at grade level, there's a deep focus on how we're ensuring that by third grade or in third grade, we're making sure that they are. The TOSAs are located at the school sites. So they are one of the staff. They're there every single day. They're teaching, modeling, they're designing and leading professional development. They analyze data to support the tier 1 instruction and to provide intervention. And because they're there, and the same with our multilingual TOSAs, we have 5 of them. They're located at our Title I schools plus Bayside. And we did that because based on our data, that's where the biggest need and the most students that are multilingual are, and Alita will talk a little bit about them in just a moment, but they're doing similar work. They're teaching, they're modeling, they're coaching, they're pushing in. They are focusing more K5 work, but a lot of it is in the K3 work since 4th and 5th have more of the math focus like we talked about last time. You don't talk anything about the multilingual?
Yeah, so our multilingual TOSAs have been really instrumental in coaching. Like that's where they spend most of their time is meeting with teachers, modeling lessons for teachers, providing resources for the strategies. And in just a short amount of time, like they've just flourished so well and have built a lot of strong relationships in these 5 schools, which happen to be the 5 schools with most of our multilingual students are located in terms of numbers. So they're just, you know, collaborating with teachers every single day and collaborating with our language and literacy TOSAs as well. So as one big coaching team.
And even if your school, I think that weekly collaboration is important, because even if you're a school that doesn't have a full-time multilingual TOSA, because the LNL and the multilingual meet often, there's a lot of transfer of knowledge, or, hey, my students are struggling with this, do you have thoughts or advice? And they kind of work it out in our meetings together. So the types of supports that we see with this team of teachers is, we said, the collaboration, the professional development days, which Aleda in just the next slide will talk to you about what that look like this school year. We hold one staff meeting a month for the grade level specific work. So the LNL and the multilingual TOSAs are meeting with teachers around the literacy work in K-3. Again, they're there every day on site. They support students, they support teachers and their administration. They have weekly meetings with their principals to look at data, to talk about what's working, what's not working. And again, they provide tier 1 intervention and also assessment support. When you assess the little kids, it takes a lot of time. So they're providing that support as well.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about those professional development days and what we're doing. We have 3 district professional development days for our teachers. One was in October, we had another in January, and we're about to have our 3rd one in a couple of weeks on March 29th. And this year we have a more long-term approach to providing professional learning for our teachers. So during the entire year, we're focusing on building capacity for our kinder through 3rd grade teachers around 3 signature strategies that are ELD, English Language Development Strategies. These strategies are meant to support our students in developing their academic language. So if you go back to the slide in which I was talking about all the different elements that are part of this comprehensive plan, giving students access to grade level instruction, to grade level standards, to grade level text is critical for them to accelerate their learning. And these strategies are meant to do that. So one of them is the language function wall, which helps students analyze how language is used, how they can use it in their writing and their speaking. Constructive conversations is an oral language strategy that helps students use more oral language to argue, to defend their evidence and claim, to really build their persuasive skills. And the 3rd one, cognitive content dictionary, is a way of helping students understand the meaning of specific academic language that they're learning about. And currently our teachers are using it during their ELA block. This is what we've started the implementation of the strategies with, is when you're doing language arts instruction and you're using PATH or you're using benchmark, how are you integrating these strategies? However, the next step would be for using the strategies during science, during math, during all the other core areas that students have to participate during the school day. Our multilingual TOSAs have been collaborating with the language and literacy TOSAs around developing the professional development days and facilitating them. So as Pam mentioned at the beginning, we've already, every single session that we provide professional learning to teachers, we're talking about 300 teachers with a team of multilingual and language and literacy TOSAs delivering that PD. So they're building their leadership capacity around delivering and facilitating professional learning for our teachers. In addition to the professional learning days, we also have additional resources. One of them is a scope and sequence for English language arts that we provided to our teachers. It really emphasizes how they're going to use the district adopted curriculum, benchmark, PATH, Haggerty, and the instructional minutes that they have to be using them. A second resource is providing monthly staff meeting time for teachers to reinforce the professional learning that they got during the district professional learning days. We also created a dashboard of resources. So the dashboard was created by Multilingual TOSAs, and it has a definition of the strategies, pictures, standards, and a lot of other resources that teachers can access. We've also given teachers more training around that intervention called Phonics for Reading. And we provided something called Student Acceleration Plan. And the Student Acceleration Plan is basically a way of helping teachers focus their instructional practices around supporting one multilingual focal student in their classroom. So it's like an inquiry cycle. They're using this inquiry cycle to analyze student data, to create an acceleration plan for a student, and they can use it for any student, but we're helping them use it for a specific student that needs to be accelerated. And lastly, we use the Elevation platform to monitor our multilingual student data. And we've recently purchased the strategies on that platform. So teachers now have access to hundreds of additional strategies that they can use in their classroom for supporting multilingual students or any student that they feel needs the support.
Here's a quick clip of this. So the last video was of a veteran teacher. This is a first year. It's like one of my favorites. She's so awesome. She's a first year teacher at Bayside, just talking about.
To me, as a first year teacher, I was so nervous that I would have to like come up with everything on my own. So to have like a guide to follow is really helpful, and to just know what's expected of me so that I can like meet those expectations. And like going into teaching, you know, I feel like I heard all these stories and I was like really just hoping for like a supportive team, and I feel like I definitely got that. And that's the thing I tell everyone when they ask me how teaching is going. Admin has been really supportive to me as a new teacher, and anytime I have problems, they're like quick to help or do whatever they can to support me. So we just had a literacy staff meeting yesterday where we met with K through 2 to just talk about our plan going forward, our goals, what we're hoping to see, what we're hoping to do. But it's also really great to hear from other grade levels what they're doing and how it's going, because it just means that, you know, like I know how to support my kids for when they go into second grade, because I got to talk to the second grade team yesterday, and I know what the kindergarten team is doing to like help the incoming first graders. I'm really thankful for everyone here and all the support and the guidance that I've gotten. So.
Yeah, we were just really excited to hear her speak and share her experience being a first-year teacher in first grade. So one of the other elements that is really important to making sure that this plan is possible are our families. So we want to mention a few ways in which we engage our families. We have community service specialists in our district office who are very involved with our families. They constantly look at our performance data, and they use this data to inform which families they will be communicating with and supporting them to access footsteps to brilliance. So that's one approach. Another approach that our schools are using are what we call family literacy nights. So some of our schools have already had family literacy nights in which they provide strategies, ideas for how families can engage their children at home and continue to build these strategies and learning opportunities. The third one is around how do we support our multilingual families? We have a diverse group of multilingual families. We have over 55 different languages spoken in our district. So one way that our schools engage with our multilingual families is through ELAC meetings. So during ELAC meetings, some of our schools have also provided family literacy nights specifically for these families. And during our district DLAC meetings, we also engage our families in these conversations around literacy. Our next meeting for DLAC will be next week, and that's precisely what we're doing. We're bringing resources around footsteps to brilliance, engaging them around how to access those resources, what are some tips that they can use at home with their multilingual students.
And we mentioned earlier, our third part of our work is really looking at the data. So we'll share some data that you've seen. I'll go through those kind of quick, and then Elena has some new, interesting, exciting data to share around our multilingual learners. So when we talk about data, the assessments that we use in our district for language and literacy, and early literacy in particular, but we have CAS for the language arts, that 3rd through 8th grade. We have our LPAC, which is kinder through 8th grade. We have our PAF benchmark assessments, which you've seen for K2 this year, and I realize it's not on there. We have reading inventory that was for this year that helps us know for 3rd through 8th grade what the student's lexile level is. This data was presented by David Chambliss at our last board meeting, but just want to bring it back to our attention. This is looking at our fall to winter growth in PAF from this school year. And we're excited to see that in kinder and first, our data is going up. We do have some leveling off in second, which isn't, when we look at that, that's sometimes expected because this cohort hasn't received PAF yet from kindergarten. So, we're kind of catching up with that work. So is that just a motion?
Yeah, a motion.
I know.
Let's try.
Okay. Light on. But overall, we're seeing more students meeting and exceeding. I think we're all like worried about power outages, right? And these are our student groups.
That's where
I know, that's what did I. These are our student groups. And again, we still have our gap between the groups that we want to see. But the exciting part is that across the student groups, we're seeing an increased number of students that are meeting and exceeding standard from fall to winter. So that data I know we've looked at before, but this is some new data that Aleda's team has developed and looked into that we are excited to share.
Yeah, we are excited to just be able to disaggregate our data by language, by multilingual typologies. So I have there on the graph 3 different language typologies. The first one is newcomer students. So a newcomer student is anyone who's just arrived today and has been in our country for up to 2 years. The second group is what we call our continuing English learner students. And this is a student who's been in our country between 3 to 5 years. The third group are what we call reclassified fluent English proficient speakers, RFEP, the students who have reclassified, they're no longer getting English language development or ELD. So I'm happy to share some data. We've been able to disaggregate that data by these 3 different typologies. So in this first slide, you'll notice that we're pointing out how many of these students have exceeded, met, nearly met, or not met the benchmark for the winter. And we're happy to just share out that, especially for our continuing English learners, the middle group, about 40% of them met or exceeded the benchmark, and another 31% of them nearly met the benchmark. So that's exciting news. And, for our RFEP students, we do expect them to continue to meet benchmark. As you can see there, they're already exceeding or meeting our district benchmarks. And our newcomer students, they're in the process of acquiring language. So it's natural to see a different range of performance there. The second graph, we want to show you how much growth. So when it comes to language acquisition, what we want to see is that students are making growth from one period to the next. So we're taking the same 3 typologies: newcomer, continuing English learners, and reclassified students. In this graph, you'll notice that about 45% of our newcomer students have actually increased from the fall to the winter. And about 40% of our continuing English learners have shown an increase again from fall to winter. And the last graph, we can go to the next one. We are actually now going one step further, and we are providing you with data for different language typologies and different grade levels. So we're focusing on the graph on the left is showing you newcomer students in kinder, first and second grade, while the graph on the right is showing you students who are continuing English learners for the same grade levels. So we want to point out some really great progress here for our newcomer students. About 50% of them in grades kinder and first have made progress from the fall to the winter. And for our continuing English learners, we noticed that close to 60% of our continuing English learners in kinder have met benchmark or have shown growth, and about 50% of them in first grade have shown growth as well. So that's the kind of data that we really want to see when we're thinking about supporting multilingual students, is we want to see growth happen from one testing period to the next, specifically among those different typologies. So that's how our team really likes to analyze data. We also want to point out what are the certain things that we do with the data. So it's not just data for data purposes, but we use data to inform instruction. We use a continuous improvement model in which we look at the data, we reflect on the data, we plan instruction based on the data, and then we reflect again on the impact that that data has made. And Pam is going to share a little bit more of what that looks like.
So I remember at our last board meeting, there was a conversation like, we just got it. It was fresh off the internet or I don't know, we don't copy it anymore, but fresh off of the computer. And we were able to create pictographs and share it with you. And it was so fresh that, well, what were we about to do with it? So we wanted to share that with you guys. And so when we get the data, the first thing we do district-wide, because it really is at our fingertips and we're able to see it so quickly in Illuminate, that we start analyzing it right away. We share that immediately with district administrators. And because we have weekly TOSA meetings, we share it with our TOSAs as well. And we do it by school, we disaggregate it, we talk about the students from the fall, and we talk about students from the winter, who's made growth, who hasn't made growth. So we get that quick bird's eye view of what's going on with the data. At the same time, our community service specialists get the data as well, because they have students in schools that they're working with to see, are they using at-home program? Do they need support? And so when we pull down the data, we add to the spreadsheet minutes on footsteps of brilliance. We also add absenteeism, which is something that we're looking at as well, because things that we're finding is if you're in school, you're more likely to access the curriculum and you're making growth. If you're not in school, it's a lot harder. The footsteps of brilliance section also, if they're using it, we're finding that they're making progress and making growth. If they're not using it, some of them are still making progress, but maybe not up at the same level. So we take this data and we spend time looking at it. We have data protocols where we're looking at thinking about what's working, what's not working, what are some patterns that we're seeing district-wide, and what are patterns that we're seeing at the school site. And so that sort of is kind of our planning where we're talking about it kind of bigger picture. From there, the TOSA team, Aleda's team, and we come together and we say, okay, now we want to bring this to the staff. And so the TOSAs, we developed some of the staff meeting and grade level meeting conversations that we saw some of the slides before where we take that data right away and bring it back to the school sites. And so the TOSA, we're developing with them, they bring it to their principal and they plan out the staff meeting there. Sometimes it happens at the staff meeting, sometimes it happens at the staff meeting and then a following grade level meeting. Some of the schools are able to work out where they're getting substitute teachers. They meet with the teachers for 2 hours at a time. We want to do that everywhere. It's hard to do with substitutes, but that's a great model where you have data meetings for not just the hour in the afternoon, but you're focused in with your grade level team during the school day. And then a lot of this data ends up in the care team meetings, because if there's some students that the school is particularly worried about, they have data right there to bring back to monitor the progress of the student. From those meetings, the grade level team with the TOSA support starts thinking about what instructional strategies do we need to improve or increase, or maybe the students doing well and they don't need them anymore, because we always want to have flexible grouping in order to ensure that the students are making progress. So instructional strategies can look like the TOSA meeting with the grade level team and the teacher saying, okay, it looks like this group of students seems to be making progress, but now we have these students who are struggling. Why don't we kind of rework the way we're meeting with students? Or your kids are making progress. We have a couple of students that, you know, are making a little bit less growth than the others. What can we do in the classroom to support, like some of the things I mentioned earlier? Or even the someone's really not making growth at all, and the TOSA and the teacher determine this student needs tier 2 in addition to what's happening at tier 1. So those are the conversations that happen at the school site. And then after that, we're just monitoring the progress of the student. We only do our benchmark 3 times a year, but the K2 assessment, even though we input it in Illuminate, it's a paper and pencil assessment. So the teachers have the student assessment with them to go back and say, okay, they're now getting these sounds or they're now getting these words. So I see them making growth. I see them I see them making progress or not just yet. So they're constantly going back and reflecting on that. But I want to take it a step further, and we want to talk a little bit about a sample of what that could look like with one particular student. Aaliyah's going to talk a little bit more about the student acceleration plan and how we use that to have an asset-based approach. In the background is a video of one of our TOSAs working with one of our students on what we mean by additional strategies, because the student, I'll talk about them in just a moment, we're not yet seeing growth with.
Yeah, so the student acceleration plan is actually a document that teachers fill out during the professional development days. And it's an asset-based approach to analyzing the student data. We start out by helping the teachers reflect on what are the assets that they're noticing for one specific student in their class that they want to focus on. Then they collect this baseline data. It could be the PAP, it could be additional teacher observations or past data sets that they've collected. Then they go into a root cause analysis, thinking about what is causing the student to have these literacy gaps. And they start to form a hypothesis of what might be some possible strategies or lessons they want to try out, in addition to creating a SMART goal, a goal that is time-bound, that is, asset-oriented, that is measurable, and they have to write it there. The next step is to actually come up with an acceleration design, like what will I be doing next week to support this student? So it gives the teachers actionable items that they need to carry out in order to really support that one student. And they come back to this form every time that we provide professional learning to them during the district days.
So this is a student case where it's a first grader, multilingual student, also receives speech and language services, and they were not meeting on the fall, and they're still not meeting on the winter. And so this was brought up when we got obviously our winter assessments. The teacher knew, I mean, they were doing stuff with the student because they don't have to wait for the winter assessment, but that assessment's like kind of a check mark for us to see with the progress. So the first thing that the TOSA, the teacher talked about is, let's make sure they're getting their tier 1 support. Is the student getting designated integrated ELD in the classroom? What does scaffolding look like in the classroom? Meaning, what supports does the student need in order to access the curriculum, and ensuring that the student feels welcome in the classroom. Tier 2 supports are, like we said, can be done in the classroom and outside. So you kind of have in here what's actually happening in the room and then what's happening with the TOSA. So a couple of things that the teacher and the TOSA determined needed to support the student. Again, it's not all kids, this student and a couple of others in particular, is they needed increased access to letter and sound picture charts. So for example, and you see the student in the video working with the picture chart. So for example, in most classrooms, you'll have the picture chart up on the wall. Some students need it on their desk. Right? There's one-to-one support or small group support after a lesson. So teacher teaches the lesson, but then says, well, I'm going to come meet with you again to ensure that you access the lesson, because sometimes it's hard for all students to access the lesson in whole group. This year, F2B, Footsteps of Brilliance, they use the path, scope, and sequence. So they align the footsteps of brilliance work with our instructional sequence and path, which is very exciting for us because now the teacher is able to customize what the student's doing at home with footsteps of brilliance. So for example, in this one, they're working on CVC, short vowel sounds. So the teacher is assigning the student that exact work to be done at home on footsteps of brilliance. They also modifying text to support to ensure that they're making meaning. The student is, because we didn't see growth, meeting with the TOSA a few times a week as well. And this is what it looks like. You can't hear it, but what the TOSA is doing with the student is repeating, because this student, they determine, needs additional practice, but not with a lot of different words. It's with the same group of words. And so what the student's doing is they're saying them orally, they're writing them, and then they're doing like the picture cards to ensure that they're making meaning. So from all of our big data, we look at, well, what are we doing for all of our students? The student acceleration plan allows the teacher and the TOSA to really hone in on a few students that are demonstrating the need to make more growth. It seems like, why can't we do this for everybody? But what we do know, and what works best in classroom, is when you get to focus in on some students, it affects what you do with everybody. So what we did find out from the student is, at the beginning of the year, they were at 0 words not meaning, and now they're at 6. So we have seen some growth, but one of the things that came out of this, because the student received speech and language, is the TOSA and the speech teacher started collaborating. And what they found was that they were using different letter charts. And so for a multilingual, for a multilingual learner, that could be confusing. And so they really align the strategies for the student. So when the student is in any setting, they're seeing the same thing. So that's kind of one of the great things that comes out of, you get this big data, and this is kind of the data dive that we do at the work.
So
We've got more to do.
there's a lot more to do, but some of our next steps include just being able to analyze our data from different angles, using different approaches so that we can really hone in on the students who need that additional support. We want to continue the professional learning around the same strategies that we've provided this year, and add any additional strategies as the teachers feel is needed and are ready. We want to continue to align our tier 1 with tier 2 and tier 3 intervention supports for our students, and thinking about screeners that we want to be able to provide to our students. If we really want to get good at intervention, we have to be able to screen for the different needs that our students have. So those are the next steps that we want to be able to focus on for next school year. And thank you so much for all of your attention today. And we want to just give you all an opportunity to ask questions.
Well, thank you for this wonderful presentation. Very informational. I'd like to open it up to the board at this time for any questions or clarification.
Yeah, I had a question about, like, we're talking about K through 2nd, but we're also expanding our TK and our preschool programs. And so can you talk a little bit about, I know it's like not part of the presentation, but what are the ways that we're setting up those curricula as well to like dovetail into what we're doing in K through 2nd?
Yeah, I guess we could have put that on next steps, because we are meeting with our preschool team, and I meet with the TK team monthly this year to start building our conversation around the this work that we're doing. Our TK team in the summer was part of the K3 professional, so it's pre-K. Preschool and TK were part of the summer PD. What we found during the school year is that we started doing a couple of different things with TK and preschool. But Aleda and I are meeting with Amanda Driscoll and Christina Haley as we're thinking about the rollout of this program, of this work. It wouldn't be that we're taking PAP and doing that at pre-K and TK, but what does it look like? Because we know, you saw if students weren't getting this in K, they kind of struggle by the time they get to 2nd. Imagine what it's going to be like when we started, all the kids are going to be starting in preschool. We develop their early literacy skills, which again looks different in preschool and TK than it does in the other grade levels, but letter sounds, like knowing our letters. So we're in the beginning conversation.
Yeah, another other reason why is because if we've walked those classrooms at Turnbull Preschool, and we've engaged in conversations with Amanda and Christina, and they've shared with us that most of their students are multilingual, and they actually have multilingual staff now. And for a long time, they've been multilingual. So this is a perfect opportunity for us to engage, and what would be the next steps to be able to develop a comprehensive literacy plan that begins in preschool and continues all the way to 8th grade.
And if I can chime in, I think we also just want 3-year-olds to love books and 4-year-olds to just be excited about the new book that the teacher is going to show them, or, you know, the book that, you know, getting into the school library and sort of thinking about it that way, where they're not separate from our school, where we say, no, Turnbull students go and get their library book, and had just part of the culture of the shift that we're making. It does take a little bit of time to get those things started, but I know you guys have spent time with Amanda and Christina now that they've been able to settle.
Yes, we let them settle.
We had to give them a little bit of time to settle, but just to sort of make it feel like it's all part of one big plan and not separate plans that are kind of trying to merge.
At our last PD day, our TK team did training with Twig Science, because that's one of our programs that goes in, that has a TK based curriculum. And from that, we saw all this opportunity for literacy and literature, and we purchased or we're purchasing a lot of the books that a lot of curriculum programs, they will recommend books, but we want to purchase them. So the teachers are very excited about this thematic style of teaching, because in TK and pre-K, you're not sitting for as long. So how do you, bring this work to life and do it across the day? So that was very.
Just want to thank you guys again for the presentation, especially following up from our last meeting, kind of seeing how a lot of this data is feeding into specific strategies, going into more detail on those was super helpful. Just a few quick follow-up questions I had. For what percentage of K-3 students in our district require tier 2, tier 3 support currently, like in terms of percentages, if you have a rough number? I know it wasn't part of the data in the set, but do you have a sense of how many students require that higher level of support currently?
I mean, I know it varies. I don't have a district-wide number. I know it varies by school site. So some of our school sites, I would say it could be only maybe 5% of students need that. But at some of our school sites, it could be close to 50% of the school of the students that need it. Our goal, because the MTSS structure is 80% of students should be able to access in tier 1, and only 15 or so need tier 2, and then only about 5% need tier 3.
So
that's our goal. Yeah.
I was just gonna add, in the MTSS framework, if we notice that in a specific classroom, in a specific school, we see more than 20% of the students not performing, we don't give them all intervention. What we do is we go back to tier 1 and we modify instruction in the classroom. So, which is our main strategy right now, is not giving intervention to like hundreds and hundreds of students, but just modifying that tier 1 instruction so that all students can start, accessing learning.
Gotcha. Okay.
And if I can add just for a second, the students entering kindergarten at school A will, on the first, we basically give a reading test about 3 weeks into school, right? We want the kids to get a little bit acclimated to their new teacher, their friends, but in about the 3rd, 4th week of school, we're testing their reading ability. In kinder, that's basically asking kids, do you know the letters and do you know the letter sounds? Can you write the letters, kind of thing. So it's a pretty straightforward test. So at school A, we might have 90% of kids who already know all their letters, who are able to say, this is a G, this is an L, this is an F. And at school B in our district, 22% can do that on the first day of school. So it's really about the path that school is on. So if I started with 78% of my kinders didn't name the letters in the alphabet, we're checking again in January. What's interesting about our test is how we report grade level. We move the target. So at the beginning of the year, the target is, can you name 10 letters? You can do that on the 3rd week of school, you're at grade level. By January, we expect 24. By May, and this is in kinder, we expect you to be able to name them, but identify the sound and maybe even write some of them. So what we see happening is the greatest growth that we see is from a child's growth from the beginning of kindergarten to the end of kindergarten. And so now, 2 years ago was our first group of kinders that had this type of instruction. So they're now in first grade, finishing up, pretty close to finishing up first grade. And their scores are really quite remarkable. We have a couple of schools where there's some grade levels where we've spotted some, as Aleida mentioned, just some bubbles where it's sort of surprising that, you might have a first grade class of like 60 kids at a school like Lead, for example. And you say, oh, let me look at that number. So if it's at 38%, you go, I want to find out what's going on. And we go visit the school and meet with the principal and analyze the data that way. Then we have this whole other apparatus that happens that actually Pam and Aleida don't manage. It's our extended learning program team managers, where we bring kids in for extended after-school programs and extended camps and summer school. And we do intervention with students, but that's outside of the day. So we really kind of want to marry both. And how we select kids for that program is based on how they score on these reading exams.
And can I, Trustee, I want to add a point that Pam and Aleida can go into more detail on. We have had schools that historically that pyramid that you saw that's on its point has actually looked like a regular pyramid, and that very low percentage of students are meeting standards, and you have huge percentage of students are not meeting, and you cannot tier two your way out of that many students. It's just not possible. But quite recently at one of our schools in kindergarten, at a most recent assessment period, we had 2 students who were not meeting standards out of the entire kindergarten.
One of our Title I.
And this is one of our schools where that pyramid has been the wrong way. And so when you see how that then builds across years.
And that's an outlier, but not a significant.
No.
It's sort of, I don't want to
Yeah.
suggest that sort of like our other Title I schools are way behind. They're not. It's
No,
just
they're
sort of
not.
remarkable to be like, wow, really 2? That's like
Yeah.
amazing. But the others are also making
Yeah.
honestly very big gains.
Mhm.
Probably, I think you're going to find somewhere between 16 and 18%. Again, we test 3 different times, so that number does change as the year progresses. And I think what we have always said from the beginning is the national research will tell you about 10% of students struggle to be at grade level. But we have schools where that number has been 60 to 70%. So we're going from, how do we get from 64% closer to 10 every year? And that first year was like leaps and bounds.
It was.
The second year, we're doing better, but it's deepening the practice.
For that. And actually, on a somewhat related note, the multilingual learner data chart, I think for continuing EL 2nd grade. So I think there was, like 10% showed a decrease. I know some of that could be testing variants or other issues, or like chronic absenteeism, like Dr. Hayden talked about at the last meeting. But I was curious if we have a better sense of what caused that one, because everything else seemed to fall within the expected range, but that seemed unusually high for 2nd graders and continuing ELs.
Yeah, I mean, we asked the same question, and some of our, data points are that these are the students who didn't have this comprehensive plan when they started in kindergarten. It's been 2 years of implementing the plan, so these students got the plan last year as first graders and now in 2nd grade, but they didn't have it in kindergarten. As our superintendent was mentioning, a full year of lost instruction, or not lost instruction, but not this comprehensive approach of learning.
Got it. And then one last question. This is something that I'm hearing a lot from parents. Because of kind of the budgetary concerns in the district, I hear from a lot of parents who are critical of certain, whether it's ST math, particulars and others, because it wasn't a good fit for their child. And I've, talked about our own studies in the district about how it's been beneficial to other students, maybe in different schools or different stages of learning. Can we, I guess, given that a lot of these were piloting, we're not sure in 5 years whether or not we'll be using the same platforms. Can you tell me a little bit more about how, I guess, effective or widely used Footsteps to Brilliance specifically is? Because especially when, for example, on the PTA liaison, they'll talk about you're cutting this funding for this project, but you're investing, this much money in this type of tech that my child can benefit from. And I always have to kind of bring them back to the big picture. But to the extent that for the public benefit, if you speak a bit for that, that would be very helpful in terms of having that context.
Do you want me to start? Okay, good. I'll start.
I just don't want to be rude.
Yes. So when I've had the opportunity to share what we're doing in our district to outside, I think the first thing I talk about is with having not just an achievement and wellness goal, but also having an equity goal. We're always thinking about what do the students who depend on us need. And so we know that, my own children or children that might not need something like footsteps, they have had access to very high level apps or high level programs or lots of things in home at their fingertips. And one of the things that we always want to ensure is that every student in our district has access to that. And so one of the things about Footsteps of Brilliance that from the minute I learned about it, and actually I think I found out about it differently. We talked about it later after I set up a meeting with someone to learn more about it, was that not only does it support students in a kind of a gamified way to learn the early literacy skills, but it does it in a bilingual way. And I know for me, I've never seen a program or an app that does it with such ease. Because a lot of times you'll have apps, either they're only in English, or if they are in Spanish, you need to go to another link to get to the Spanish, and it's not really authentic. It doesn't really translate, and it's very clunky. And so for me, when I see our students using Footsteps of Brilliance and I see our parents using it with their students, I think that's why we have this program, because we want to ensure that every student has the same access to high quality programs at home, and that you can use it without the internet, that you can use it in any sort of device, that we have these one-to-one Chromebooks that go home and our students when they get home can do it. And it's a program that I said they met with me to say, we want to make sure that our program supporting your district's need, send us your scope and sequence so we can create something in our program that your teachers have more access to use.
I also think anytime a school district rolls out a resource, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword where you want people to have access to it, you want families to understand how it works, and you want kids to use it, but you also are aware that for some it won't work, and it's true of every app or every tool that you put together. So the ability that we have to analyze who is using it and how often they are using it and when they're using it, what they're doing on it is one of the most important components of the Footsteps of Brilliance program. So when we give an exam, and I just looked on my phone, our most recent assessment of reading has us at about 16.5% kinder, first and second combined, not at grade level. So 16.5%. And again, that will change in May, and hopefully it'll go down to 15 or 14 and so when we get the list of kids that are not at grade level, we use our technology here to add components of where they go to school, what are their parents' names, what are their phone numbers, how many days of school have they missed, are they multilingual, what's the language spoken at home. We have a team of employees here at the district office who I provide lists to call the families and ask, and we merge on the reading behaviors at home. So if you took a test for your first grade teacher and you're behind in reading, and we have an app that will help your child gain fluency in reading and you're not using that at home, we need to have a conversation with you about why that's happening. And one of the biggest benefits is it's free to the family. They don't have to go, as you all know, buying books is very expensive and many of our families can't afford it. And going to the library creates a different sort of obstacle for families who work two jobs and maybe don't understand the language that's spoken at the local library. So it turns into a situation where we actually call that family and we invite them here, or we've started hosting these events at their school. So in one morning, we'll meet with 25, 30, 40 families to show them how to use the program, to tell them your child is behind in reading. And if you don't do something about it now, their whole future is at risk. So it creates an urgency with a tool that they can use, but we also tell them, you can also just read regular books with your child. I don't care if they use a computer or if they use a book. I want the child to read, and I want them to be read to at home. So we show them that. For reasons having to do with the access and cost and the Wi-Fi and a lot of different reasons they choose to use the program. When we do that, the success rate for those students in improving their scores is in the 90 percentile. The children that we have a hard time reaching are the ones whose parents don't make it to that meeting. We call, we set it up, they show, if I make 25 meetings, I'm gonna get 16, 17 on average. And then we go, let's set up the meeting with the 9 that didn't show up. So that's kind of where we're at with. The other thing, because I'm very, sort of a stickler, David, when they came on board, I met with Pam and David, I don't know if you remember this, David, but we met about ST Math, and I said, so tell me about ST Math. I actually had used it in a different district, but I said, I want to see the report. Our schools weren't using it, our students weren't using it. And I said, is this a program you are committed to? And the staff said, yeah, we like this program. It's really important. It's a good skill for these kids to use. It sort of removes the language barrier from math. It's very conceptual. I said, well, then let's ask people to use it. So now we track our usage. Our usage has increased, tenfold from the 2021 school year. So we're happy to see that happen. And I also think I would want to sit with a parent who has a concern about how we organize funding to pay for programs. If the concern is they believe somehow helping one student hurts their student, I think that's a very sort of interesting way to think about it. And I would want to just talk to them about, just talk through that concern.
100% agree. And I think it was really helpful for me that I didn't have a perspective on when we did our literacy summit. I was with the community service specialist watching them bring, families in to talk through it. And I think a lot of times when people see us spending millions on an app, they think we just release it into the ether, throw it in a newsletter, and no one clicked it. And I think the fact that we have that kind of human intervention, like constant outreach, constant monitoring and tracking, I know that's a development district that I think I would like to tout more, so that it really shows that this is something we're, measuring each step of the way. And if we do hit a point where we realize we're not getting the right returns, it is something that we would sunset. But I think there's, I guess, maybe a lack of confidence just in general when it comes to technology, since a lot of us school districts rushed it out during COVID. There is a sense of, is this still, I think there was a petition recently about moving away from screens altogether. And I know that part of our rationale for pushing these programs is that ability to track, is the ability to scale, is the ability to address cost and access and resources and equity that we can't do as well in just kind of a pure, paper only format. So I do think that to the extent that we can talk about that in these sessions and just the trustees and others publicly, I do want to credit district staff for all you're doing, but I know that concern is out there. So to the extent that we are equipped with the stats and the information to go out there and talk about this, I think it's very helpful.
And we call it app time, you call it lab time, not app time, right? That's what we say. Well, because it's not about,
when we talk to the parents, no, this is lap time. The child should be on your lap doing this program with you, because we don't want you to turn your back when your child's doing this. We want you to hear the song with them. We want them to say, one of the things you can do in the program, you can record your voice. And so that's one of the last things we always do with every child. We say, have you heard your child's voice on the recording? Okay, let's do it. All right. And, it's always sort of like repeating a song that they heard. And the spark that comes on for a child who it's like, oh, that's me. Like, I just spoke in English, or I just sang the song. It's pretty special. And ultimately for us, it's not about the bells and whistles. It's not about the ease or the tech side of it. I want to change behavior. I want to sit with a family whose child isn't learning to read and say, if you do something for 20 minutes a day, every day, we tell the families there's 7 days in a week, not 5 days. We tell them you have to read every day. If they can do that, it is truly going to transform their child's education. The fact that I'm giving them a Chromebook to do it, that's not the point. The point is sit with your child for 20 minutes and read to them. If you do that, we're going to be having a different conversation in 5 years. But that's all the other thing. It takes time too. There's no silver bullet. Yeah.
President Proctor?
So I'm using, I don't know if she's.
I just would like to say thank you throughout your presentation and the comprehensive strategies that you outlined. Will continue to come into my mind is the last meeting and the concerns I had regarding the students who do not meet the criteria for special education and the students who are able to access these type of strategies that you have outlined here today. And your confirmation that these strategies automatically allow the teachers to interact with the other students and implement these strategies to help them. I feel very confident that all of my concerns have been answered tonight. And I just want to say thank you for exploring and implementing these strategies because, the students who have been left behind because they didn't necessarily have the tools or supports that were needed and required for them to excel, I feel like has been covered in here. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate so many aspects of the conversation. I mean, I think just in general, to focus on just strengthening tier one instruction is just like, it is the key, like as we've said, when we talk about the percentages, right? In terms of like, when you're looking at a classroom and 40% of students are meeting standard, like it's not about the 40%, right? It's about like the instruction that's happening and how do we strengthen that. So, yeah, I think that just the intentionality, how we're approaching this just in a really you are approaching this in a very intentional way. With not just kind of throwing curriculum at a wall, not just, like it takes this integrated approach and like consistent approach and like, well thought out approach to like actually make these things stick and to make it work, right? Because I mean, to the conversation of technology, like you can throw technology, it's not about like the program, right? It's great to have like great curriculum and all of that, but it's about like everything that surrounds it. I really love like the focus on the strategies. Like I think that's just like such a powerful tool to like really ground and like we are like really focusing on like these strategies and we're tracking students across these strategies. So I just like appreciated hearing about that and just like all the resources that you're integrating to support folks. I appreciate it. I had a question around, I know we talked about this the last time we talked about literacy, was just around like assessment. So I know like with PATH, we're assessing, with K2 and it's like predominantly like phonics decoding, like phonemic awareness, all of that. I know we had talked about like the comprehension piece of things and that's something that's kind of come up, just like in conversations with folks around like how are we getting a good sense of where kids are outside of just like CASP in terms of like reading comprehension in the lower grade level. So I was just kind of curious to hear like how we're thinking about that, what the next steps are there, how,
I think this, we recognize that when we rolling out something new with, moving from one assessment, bringing new curriculum, starting with an assessment that is embedded in the program with the right move. And I think as we continue with that, we need to constantly look at, are we getting the information we need? Are our students moving forward? I know with the work that we're doing, the multilingual, we're working on ensuring that not only are they reading, but it's about making meaning all the time. So as for right now, for our assessment district-wide, that gives us kind of a sense, are the early literacy indicators there? That's what that's letting us know, but then that's more of the work that we're doing kind of at the school site level, I think.
Do we have like plans to think about what that would look like district-wide in addition to just like school? Yes, like this.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the TOSA site teacher leader process that's going to happen over the next couple of months. Especially setting up those, beginning of second grade baselines where that comprehension can start to really, you can highlight that. You can ask that question is, they're able to decode, they're able to get through the text, but what do they really, how do they make meaning of the text? And I think for us going into next school year, That's really the next step for us. Specifically at that second grade is where it really starts to take takes hold a lot more. I think it's possible at first grade and perhaps at the end of first grade, but especially in second grade, I think that's when it starts to show. You'll be busy.
Yeah, no, I think that's great because I think, and I know that like all of these pieces are like rigorous components, right? But when you think about like, what does it mean to like, for, just to set our kids up for success, to ensure like academic rigor in these pieces, like the comprehension is a big component. And again, I know we've talked about it and I totally appreciate and can understand the like incremental, like one thing at a time. And it's like an important piece.
You're also hitting on a topic that's in the news right now. If you all Google State Senator Rubio put forth legislation requiring the use of the science of reading in instruction. And it's interesting because organizations that are usually together on things have actually taken opposite approaches to this. So the administrators organization, many very prominent school districts have lined up to support the science of reading legislation, which would basically require it for every district in California. But key groups, including the California Association of Bilingual Educators, have come out against it because of a concern that it overemphasizes only phonics at the exclusion of meaning making and multilingualism and bilingualism. And so you have these very prominent organizations writing op-eds in the LA Times and the Chronicle and the San Diego papers and these big papers basically coming out on opposite ends. And it's going to go to the legislature who sort of, these are folks that, they take their cue from PAVE and from AXA and from CTA. And I think it's going to be interesting thing to watch over the next 6 months. But what I hope doesn't get lost is these reforms have to be comprehensive. They can't solely seek to rectify an error at the expense of the greater sort of, and you've talked about that as a trustee from the very beginning. You've been an advocate for, I want to see the comprehensiveness of this, not solely correct this other thing that wasn't happening.
Well, we do that so often in education, right? Like you're swinging the pendulum in one direction or another, like it's all.
Take the walls down, open
Yeah, right?
classrooms.
It's like, hi, let's talk about balance here.
Remember that,
right?
Susie? You built some schools here like that.
Yeah.
Thank you, 60s.
And so much of it is like, again, it's like about the approach, and we know that there's like research around the approaches, and it's about like the systems around it, right? So that's interesting. I hadn't heard about that.
It's like in the last 2 weeks, like
Gotcha.
happening, right?
The other question that I had, I was just wondering, like, it was great to hear, like, to see like a snippet of classroom and to hear from like educators. I was just curious, like, what is the way in which we're kind of just like getting a pulse around like outside of kind of like the data and what we're seeing about kids and like data meetings, like how we're getting a pulse for how all of this is like landing in terms of just like the approach and the TOSA support and the data meetings, like how are teachers feeling about it and kind of what are they feeling like they need to kind of continue moving this forward. And so I'm just wondering like do we have like a systematic way that we're like gathering that like input and feedback? If not, is that something you can think about integrating?
Do you want to start first?
Yeah, I mean,
All four of us are like, please get it.
I know, it's talking about making
Who wants
eyes.
to talk?
we've been.
I was like, even that means you have an approach as well.
David, come sit over
Well,
here.
I think we have a very comprehensive approach to that as well. One way is by doing classroom walkthroughs. So our teams are going out there and we're walking the classrooms. We're seeing the plan in action, and Pam has joined us on several of those walkthroughs, and we're engaging with the principal on like what is happening in your school, what are the great highlights that we see, and what would be some next steps. We also get to talk to some of the TOSAs when we go to the walkthroughs and engage them in the conversation. So that's like one actual way that we visit the schools and the classrooms. And in the past, we have sent out teacher surveys, gathering information from them around their professional development needs. So that's something that we're actually in the process of doing again for next school year and for summer professional development opportunities that we want to offer. So, I don't know, Pam. if you wanna-
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, I know we have
Yeah.
a survey coming out,
I mean, we actually just closed
or just
today.
closed it.
A teacher survey that, well, actually survey that went with the same type of questions about the various TOSA roles and the various counseling supports that we have. It was sent to all teachers to give feedback. So K-2 teachers or K-3 teachers, excuse me, had a chance to give feedback about the language and literacy TOSAs. The teachers at the schools where we have multilingual TOSAs got an opportunity to give feedback. And it also went to principals, and it actually went to the employees themselves, the TOSAs and counselors who play those roles or fill those roles.
We want to see it from every angle.
Yeah,
And the person
exactly right.
doing the work, we want to know, what's missing, what do you count on every day for the person? If you take a school like Lee, they have a student support TOSA. We have questions about that. They have multiple language and literacy TOSAs. We want to ask about that. They have a multilingual TOSA. We want to ask about that. They have a full-time math TOSA. So that one school, it's a priority school for us. There are 5 TOSAs at that school. The staff will get a survey that acknowledges that that's the case. Other schools don't have a multilingual learner TOSA assigned to them and don't have a student support TOSA. So their survey looks different. And then, I don't know, it'll probably take us a week to really start to crunch the numbers, but we're gonna have some very significant data to look at.
Does it ask about curriculum as well, or right now it's only like TOSA?
It focuses on the strategy or the lever of those positions, but in that, it asks how, for example, to strongly agree, to strongly disagree that the language and literacy TOSA work has been instrumental to implementing the PAP curriculum. It also asks to supporting and improving teaching and learning in general in literacy. It also, it's like we've heard early on that, things happen at schools. Do they actually get pulled away from their core responsibilities? And so do you agree or strongly, disagree that that these roles are allowed to focus on the priorities and key responsibilities that they have? So we'll be happy to bring you, a report on their responses to that.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you for executing that.
And the Healthy Kids survey will also ask some curriculum questions. That does take a couple more months. So we timed it, Susie's in the back over there, so we timed it so that the Healthy Kids survey closed on a Friday. I think we opened this other one on Monday, so there was no confusion about the 2 different surveys. And, one is sort of kind of historical. We always give the Healthy Kids survey, and, staff is just sort of used to having access to that. And then this other one was very specific about the TOSA work, and we'll have that data pretty soon here. I also think opening up our schools to visitors. Will you talk just a little bit about how you open that opportunity to our teachers and?
Yeah. And I realized I didn't put in that little awesome video from the literacy summit, but I know you guys are at a couple of you are at the literacy summit. So this year, instead of kind of having administrators come in, we had a first grade teacher literacy summit, which was really focusing on the teacher work. And so what I did was, what we knew that was kind of the concept, just sent an email to every single first grade teacher saying, we're interested in hosting a summit around our literacy work. Who's interested in becoming a part of it? And we had a lot of teachers, I would say from across the schools, saying, I'd like to be a part. And so they got to choose, do I want to do a roundtable discussion? Do I want to host a visit? Do I want to be part of the panel? Thank you. The panel. And so and so from there, we were able to create some really amazing small group discussions where we had, I know I was here, a couple of the lead first grade teachers just really talking about their whole experience with this shift. We had the teachers from Meadow Heights and the TOSA talking about how they do the inclusion work. We had Beach Park really talk a lot about, and Aleda was at that school, talk about how they integrate the HAP curriculum with the benchmark curriculum and what that comprehensive approach was. So from that, we were really able to get and kind of touch base with teachers that we maybe don't hear from all the time, that wanted to really kind of share their experiences.
The other thing, is I was excited prior to the event. I was looking at all the districts that were gonna be represented. You know, Mountain View, Redwood City, San Bruno, but just really all throughout the region, Hayward,
Santa Cruz.
Santa Cruz, all these different districts. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. We have people coming to visit us. And actually, we invited first grade teachers from all those districts. So it wasn't like the principal or the superintendent. It really was a teacher event. What I ended up feeling even more proud of and more grateful for was how many of our teachers who weren't presenting and weren't on a panel and weren't hosting wanted to see what their colleagues in our, like, it was, I was like, oh, like, we need to let them see each other. Can you?
They all walk-
You know, Char's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
talking about that.
Yeah.
You know how many years, I know of the 3 years, but you've got other years before that, where it's like, how do we let them get in and see each other? And those, I listened in on those, and they were like, the two you mentioned, teachers from LEAD, they came away
Yes.
so proud
Mhm.
when they said, we're teaching like this. They went into another school and watched what they were doing and walked out and said, oh, we teach like this. This is like, we're doing it, like we're, you know, it was pretty.
I would say every teacher of ours that got to be a part of that came up and said, could we do this for everybody? Because they've never set foot in some of those schools. And to
Like,
and
let's
and
pace
I-
ourselves.
Yeah, but I'll tell you from that, thank you for bringing this up, because from that, we actually have had both in math and literacy requests from principals to go visit other schools. So in the last couple of weeks, actually today, some of the 4th and 5th grade teachers from LEAD went to Bayside to visit their math in middle school. We did that a couple weeks ago with Laurel to Abbott. I think Bayside and Laurel and another school have already gone to Meadow Heights, where we had one of our literacy sessions, because the teachers there were like, we need to bring more people here. And so we've already been, the schools have been hosting already. Sometimes it's happening during the school day, we're getting stuff. There's even been a time where they went like on a Wednesday just to be with that teacher and look at the classroom, and the teacher was sharing what they're doing. So that's, I feel like our literacy summit sparked that, and it's been very exciting. I want to keep doing it, because it is, I mean, when you're, you know, when you're a classroom teacher, sometimes you've only ever been on your school site, you haven't had an opportunity. We might see each other on a PD day, but that's different than me coming and visiting your classroom.
Even on your own school site,
Even
right?
on
Like,
your own
that
school.
doesn't always happen. So like, yeah.
100%,
That's true.
100%.
Let's
Yeah.
keep that up in like a systematic way. Add that to the part of it.
That's fun. This is it. I'm ready.
Instruction or.
How many years does it take, guys? Diego said it's been at least 3.
Yeah.
This is
No, no.
This is one step at a time.
I understand.
I mean, we, you know, last year we had, was the first year we did the principal professional learning communities at every single school. And a lot of the principals like, I've never even driven to this school before. So that, and then this year we're able to have a little bit less of them so they could be on their school site, but those were, that was kind of our first step in just getting on each other's school sites. And this year, actually, our language and literacy, math and multilingual TOSAs joined the principal professional development, principal PLC, too many letters, PPLT, we call it. So they've split up and come to those, so they're at each other's sites as well. So yeah, very exciting.
Thank you. I would like to open it up to the public now. Joel, can you please see if there are any hands raised for public comment?
Thank you. There are no hands raised at the moment.
Anyone in the audience? Well, that concludes our session this evening. Thank you again. And I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
President Proctor?
Oh, yes.
She's still there.
President Proctor?
Yes.
Trustee Tran,
Yes.
trustee Camp,
Yes.
trustee Watkins. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. 5-0.
I just had the, when you said that, I could see trustee Ken. Just for 1 second, I'm like. No.
Remember, shower when she would call roll
Well, 'cause
call.
remember
Like,
when-
oh, yeah.